Welcome to Talk the Talk, calling all activists and allies alike. It's time to come together and demand the changes we need in this unjust world. I'm Jordan, a black male activist.
And I'm Kaitlin, a white female ally, and together we created Talk the Talk, a platform for speaking candidly and constructively on race.
We will provide starting points for uncomfortable but meaningful conversations and introduce new knowledge and perspective.
We'll arm you with the tools necessary to combat racism anywhere and anytime you experience it.
Right now is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to create lasting change to the racial and social injustices in America. We challenge you to do your part and talk the talk. What up, Kay?
Hello, I'm here. I made it.
You made it. You made it. You're out here living.
Yeah.
So what's new with you? Anything new?
Oh, just moved to a new state. Started doing some other things. I'm now a full-time student and in full fancy business clothes. This is my new persona. This is it. There no more t-shirts and baseball hat. Like I normally wear like a baseball hat because COVID hair. One, my hair was green last time we recorded. Thank God it was no longer.
It was.
And I had bangs that went down like to my nose. So now it like new haircut, fancy clothes. It's like a totally.
I think you're one of the few people who's getting like more dressed up for 2020 and COVID. So applause to you for being a real adult.
We had this one. We were playing this Zoom like drinking game or whatever one time. It was like we were chit-chatting with some of your friends, and I was saying like I was the only person that still regularly got dressed, and it was like in April or something. I was like,
yeah,
I still wear like pants, like real jeans.
Crazy person. Gym shorts and t-shirts. Socks are optional.
How was your vacay?
It was cool. It wasn't anything crazy. I wasn't in Punta Cana where I was supposed to be. But I went to the Jersey Shore, made it down to Stone Harbor with a friend or a set of friends and had a great time. So honestly, it was just nice to not be on my block.
Did you pull a Snooki?
What's that?
Did you pull a Snooki?
Nah, we missed her. We were trying to hit up, but COVID, so we had to quarantine. You don't want to be around Snooki during quarantine. So since the last time we talked, there's been some pretty big news.
Oh, let's remind them. Remember, we cussed.
Oh, I always forget that. Yeah, we're gonna cuss. You're gonna say words that you shouldn't say if you're under a certain age.
I don't necessarily subscribe to that theory, but there may be some people may not like them.
Yeah. But again, it's just to make it a little more lively and a little more vibrant. It's not gonna hurt you.
And we also don't know all the answers.
Definitely don't know all the answers. We're learning with you and unlearning with you. And this is a journey for all of us together in this Talk the Talk community. Now, back to what I was saying before I rudely forgot to give our little disclosure, which is on me. Big news for these United States since the last podcast. Do you want to talk about it? You want me to talk about it? I'll talk about it.
I was gonna say you started, so.
Kamala Harris was named by Joe Biden, selected by Joe Biden to be his vice presidential running mate for the 2020 election. And I'm not gonna lie, I'm pretty hype. I'm very excited. I think she definitely spices up his ticket a little bit. Starts to bring out some other people that have been as excited about voting for Joe Biden. But I know there's some buzz around voting for Kamala Harris, who is the first Black woman, first Asian woman, first woman on a major
first across the board.
Yes, first woman, Black woman, Asian woman to be on a major presidential ticket here in these United States. So that's cool in and of itself. And then you get to talking about who she is as a candidate, and it gets even more exciting to me.
Yeah, she's fun. Is it weird too that I'm also very excited for some really fun SNL sketches?
Yes, Maya Rudolph. I was just about to say the same thing.
That person that might have been like, albeit not the first, but like definitely the second thing is that means during this SNL season I get more Maya Rudolph, which is very important to me.
So, I mean, when I found out, I was like, yo, this is great. I think she's a great choice. I think she's going to do great things for the country once they win the election. And I was like, yo, at least 4 years of Maya Rudolph.
I mean,
can you?
I can
I don't think so. I'm so hyped for that. Obviously, a secondary, but strong secondary.
I'm kind of embarrassed at how quickly I was like, but the SNL sketches. I mean, when it works, it just works, and I feel like they need a little boost.
Yeah, makes it work.
But either way, no, she's lovely. I think, to your point, she makes Biden hopefully more appealing for some other voters who are hoping for a Bernie or a Warren.
Yeah.
Maybe that softens the blow on election day. The settle for Biden folks, maybe this makes it a little better. Maybe it gets some other folks to want to switch over from Trump. Maybe not.
Hopefully. Speaking of, we are now 78 days away from, I feel like every year when the presidential election comes up, everyone says that this is the biggest presidential election in our lifetime in the history of the country. But we are 78 days away from an election that will have lasting impacts for the US, for the world, beyond just these next 4 years. So we're going to talk a little bit about the importance of doing your own research. We're going to dive into a little bit of a deep dive about who Kamala Harris is, what her history is as a attorney general, and other positions she's held before. We're going to talk a little bit about what this actual election is going to be like in the midst of the coronavirus pandemic. Most of us won't be going physically to a polling place to cast our ballot, but that does not mean we will give up the opportunity and fail on our responsibility to cast those ballots. So we'll talk about mail-in ballots and the USPS, United States Postal Service, as it stands right now, and the implications it could have that you have to prepare for and take into account with your vote this year. So Kay Floyd.
Mm-hmm.
We're thinkers here, right? We're talkers. We talk the talk.
We talk a lot. Do we always think we talk?
We like to think that we are thinkers, and
we like thinking, we like talking. Do we always think before we talk? Not necessarily.
Not 100% of the time.
Right.
But on this one, we are thinking before we're talking, and we want everyone to think before they cast their vote. So whether that is whoever you're voting for, whether that's the local election, the presidential election, you need to think, you need to spend time doing your own research. And you need to do that research by seeking out sources that are trustworthy, sources that are by authors that are not slanted one way or the other. You can also do your research by finding out what the candidates have said and done in the past. Like if your candidate can't answer a question that's posed directly to them, which happens almost every day, I feel like, on Twitter or on CNN or even Fox News, when I go over there for my hate watch, my daily hate watch of Fox News, I see all these candidates and all these pundits not even answering questions that are directly posed to them. So you want to do a deep dive into whoever it is that you're voting for before you do so. You need to know who's on your ballot from the top to the bottom, from the local all the way up to the president and vice president. You need to do all that research beforehand. So we'll wrap up with some ways that you can do that. But we do want to just make sure that you're not just scrolling Instagram, seeing a meme, seeing a TikTok, and taking that as fact, or taking a tweet from 45 as fact, because they are very rarely facts. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, but I'm going to stop myself before I get too far into a rabbit hole.
No, I think that's really important when we think about how we consume our news and what it is. Social media is great for a lot of things. It's a really great way to get information out to people. But make sure that you're looking at potentially both sides, or if I think a lot of times it's really hard to find things that are not politicized and don't have a slant. albeit like I read the Skim every morning and I love it. I think it's great.
Yeah, definitely slightly.
But it probably has a liberal-ish slant to it.
For sure. And
that's fine. I mean,
one of the things I like about the Skim is that they do, even though they have a liberal slant, they still provide you the news. Like their quips and their comments and their writing style definitely has a liberal slant to it because the people who are writing it are liberal. But I don't think they're not propaganda. They're not putting out unfounded truths in my opinion.
I think they do a fair job about where, so again, using the Skim, for those who don't know, it's a daily email with like the quick hits of the news. So you get a paragraph on, you have like 3 or 4 paragraphs to read on like some of the biggest news stories in the US and around the world. It's great if you don't have a ton of time to sit and watch the news and sift through the bullshit.
But the Skim, it's a really good jumping off point. It's like, okay, these are the stories that are relevant today. I can go do more research on these.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, this is also non-spawn, but we love the Skim. I think they do a better job than others about pulling their sources from a variety of other news,
for sure.
In a more fair way. So it's not like they're hitting up CNBC every single time for all of their links if you want to read more about something. And I think just take everything with a grain of salt. Like we talked about it, I feel like in 2016, but you need to sit down and think critically on like what makes sense. Does this really sound like it's true? Are there other places I could look for this information? Social media, like I said, is really great because it's a good way to get quick information, but don't just stop there. There should never just be one. Don't let your news, and unfortunately it's this way now. I don't think this is, I mean, we could go on and on about like the news and 24-hour media cycle, but don't let the buck stop with like one source. Unfortunately, now we have to think critically and we have to look at multiple things to compare and contrast.
Yeah, I mean,
the truth in the news is like a sentence, or a couple sentences. Like, this is what happened.
Mm-hmm.
Everything else around it is fluff.
Right.
And while, like I said, like fluff could be great, and I agree with the fluff that the Skim has. It's quippy. It's very millennial. It's funny. It does have a slightly liberal slant to it. Like, I can separate out and say like, oh, okay, this is what happened in Belarus. Okay, cool.
Cool. All right. Cool. If I want to learn more, I can.
Yeah.
But at least I know what's happening in the world around me, because the world around you has a direct impact on you. And we talked a little bit briefly. We introed on Kamala Harris, and it's like the word comma hyphen la Harris. So Tucker Carlson, if you're listening, learn how to say this woman's name, please, and stop being disrespectful and saying her name is whatever, because so annoying. But again, slanted one way, slanted another way. Her name factually is Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris. We're not excited about her only because she's the first Black woman or the first Asian woman or the first woman. This isn't about identity politics, so I want to make that super clear from the start. I know that's a buzzword and like a trigger word for some people, but that's not why I personally, and why Kaitlin, not when it's speaking for you, but like I don't know why you want to vote for her, but I'm sure we're going to learn about it. I'm voting for her based on her history of taking action for things that I care about. And to me, that's what's most important.
Right.
The fact that she's a Black woman and she has she's also South Asian, and like, that's awesome. That makes me excited because we haven't had that before, but that's not the sole reason at all. That's not even the driving force of the reasons of why I'm excited for her. You look at her, she was the first woman. She was the first Black person, first South Asian person to be the San Francisco district attorney. All of those same qualifiers. She was the first of all of those to be the first attorney general of California. She's never lost an election, and she's actually run for office before, unlike other politicians who we have to deal with on a daily basis, Trump. But she's never lost an election. So like she's a winner. She knows how to go out and win. She gets results. She's just a badass. Like I'm just so excited. I'm so excited about her.
Yeah, she we'll get into it, but she, like any career politician, has some skeletons in their closet, or, you know, we say do your research. We really mean that. Look and see like what people's voting habits are. Where did they sit on certain issues? You need to sit down with yourself and figure out what's most important to you in any election, and particularly come November, what's most important to you, and weigh in on what that looks like. And people are going to, there is no perfect politician, I think, is something that's super important. Jordan and I were talking before this, and it's like, you don't need to think about your politicians as being like the one for like a perfect marriage. That doesn't exist. Also, I don't believe a perfect marriage exists, but we can like, that's its own thing. But politics and elections are, you're not waiting for like your Uber Black to come pick you up and take you right to your exact destination. That's not realistic.
You have to be an active participant in politics.
You want to get on the bus. If the bus takes you the direction that you want to go, get on the damn bus. I think that's something that's really important, because I can see that adding Kamala to the ticket, you're gonna get pushback from the far right saying she's too progressive, don't vote. You know, if you're middle of the road, if you're independent, if you're like a blue dog Democrat, which do those exist anymore? I don't know. They're gonna be like, she's too progressive, don't vote for her. Super progressives on the left are gonna say like, she's not progressive enough. Mm-hmm. There is no one that is truly, truly perfect.
And that goes back to
adding her to the ticket will take. Mm-hmm. We'll go the direction that Jordan and I see fit. And this is also to say, like, if this episode, I think we could get some drop off from listenership. I'm like, we're not impressing upon you to vote one way or the other. This is what we think is important, and based on like caring for progression and moving forward in terms of like race relations and ending systemic oppression in this country. Jordan and I both feel that Kamala Harris and Joe Biden move closer towards those objectives, which are very important to us. And we hope that like through your listenership and learning and growing with us, that like that is something that becomes important to you.
I love your analogy of the difference between politics not being like an Uber Black. Like, it's not going to be this perfect Mercedes that comes up brand new, puts you in the car, opens the door for you, takes you to where you want to be at this big fancy hotel. It's a bus. Like, there's other people there with you. There's other people that you have to be around. There's other stops that are going to be made. There's other issues that are going to be addressed. And you have to be an active participant in it, or else it's not going to work the right way. And another thing that I love about both Joe Biden and Kamala Harris is that they are responsive to the people who are voting for them. They're responsive to their constituents. They're active. They're actively listening. Like, there are politicians that are not that way. So when you see people arguing against her track record and like flipping or flopping on one thing, I think it's not a flip flop. It's progress. Like, she's grown, she's evolved as a person. Like, she started as the San Francisco DA in 2004. If she didn't change over those 16 years, that to me would be a problem, because then you're just someone who's sticking to the script of what you think you're supposed to stick to, as opposed to being a critical thinker. And that relates directly back to all of us as listeners and voters and people who want to drive change. You have to be ready and willing to change. And if you're not, and you're just voting for someone because that's the party that you're a part of, or anything with identity politics, or you're voting for someone because that's what the people around you are voting for, and that's the only reason, like, you haven't done your own research, that is a failure on you to be a part of the process, of the political process, which is exactly what this is. When you fail to do that, you're not an active participant. You're basically just a disciple for a man or a woman who's in a position of power, which gets very dangerous very quickly. So again, it's very important to go out, do your research, think for yourself, and do all of that, and then be an active participant. Do you have anything else on like the importance of like doing your part, or are we good to move on to some of the conversations around Kamala Harris?
Let's chat about her track record. We like hinted about it, so let's like take a little bit of a deep dive.
Okay, so like I said, 2004, she was the San Francisco district attorney, and despite what some have said, like Kaitlin alluded to, where she was either one too far to the left, too far to the right, her track record aligned with a lot of the things that I personally care about, such as police reform or criminal justice reform. Like those are two things that are not just hot button topics now because they're more in the media, but this is something that I've always personally cared about. Um, you want to talk about being just doing the right thing as a politician. When she was an AG, Attorney General of California, she decided that it was not right to charge youth prostitutes with crimes. Instead, she's like, okay, these people are in this situation because they were taken advantage of. They're not criminals, they are victims. And she didn't treat them, she wasn't like, okay, they're victims, but we have to send them to jail because that's what we've always done. She's like, okay, they're victims. They need to have programs and support and resources so they can deal with the trauma they've experienced, make sure that their mental health is okay, their physical safety is okay, and then give them the resources to get out of that terrible, horrible situation. Right. Whereas, like, that was not what was done before. And you want to call it progressive or too liberal or whatever, like, it's just the right thing to do.
Yeah, no child is like, oh, this sounds like a good idea. Let me like independent, like there are other contributing factors to seeking that out. I think one other thing to that point that I think is really great that she did in terms of like the same vein of like criminal justice reform. She created a program for first-time drug offenders with second chances and the opportunity to earn high school degrees and find jobs. So it's like what we talk about where, you know, like people make mistakes and I understand rules are rules are rules and like they should be followed. But I think Jordan and I have again and again reiterated systemic issues with how we are currently set up and that there are very easy pitfalls for folks to fall into, and we shouldn't condemn people into a life of crime for things that we can help and prevent. So like getting engaged within your community and helping those people. So giving these people an opportunity to get an education and get a job, which Jordan and I talk about in one of our earlier episodes, is literally a leg up in how you can get out of those situations and help yourself and your family and move forward. So things like that where we talk about like community-focused solutions, I think she champions more times than not and has continued to move towards those ideologies throughout her career. Let's not look at like several decisions that were made in the early 2000s or early 2010s. Let's look at where she's at now. It's like her career is not I understand careers can be made or broken based on one single decision. I don't think that these are the decisions that she made previously in California, I don't believe are decisions that should break her career.
For sure.
Her choice and where she's at now, by and large as a whole, she is moving towards actually helping people, which is what I want out of someone who represents me.
And I think you kind of started to touch on a point, like who she was in the early 2010s. Yeah, that was not that long ago, like, 9 years ago. But she, again, was willing to change with the times. Like, the way that policing was looked at was different in the early 2010s than what it is now. Like, I've said it before, but the veil over people's eyes of the actual systems that are in place that are making life a disadvantage for some people, that veil's been removed. So right. As that has been removed and the expectations for politicians has changed, she's changed along with that. And that's not pandering. That's growing and developing and becoming a better politician. Now, a lot of people are probably going to bring up like Joe Biden's history with the crime bill in 94. Fair, super fair. That's something that I bring up with him, and it should be brought up because it's part of his history. And to me, Kamala Harris is going to be a huge force in challenging him and pushing him to continue to evolve as a president. Whereas on the other side, like, I don't really think of Mike Pence as someone who's going to step up and be like, hey, Donald, I think we should go this way. Or like, I think this is an okay idea, but I think we can make it better. Like, I don't see that happening on that side. Whereas,
would you be happy with his suggestions?
Regardless, I just don't see that happen. Like, regardless, without even getting into like what their policies are.
Yeah.
The personalities that they have and the personalities that they displayed over their 3.5, 4 years in office have not been that. It's never been like a back and forth, a conversation, at least not publicly or at all, like with what his responsibilities are. Like, I've never in my lifetime, which honestly hasn't been for that many presidents where I've actually been, cognizant of what's going on in the world in politics, but I don't remember a vice presidential candidate that could step in so readily to be president. Like, at the drop of a hat, I could see Kamala Harris being the president of the United States and not just like stepping in and being like an interim. Like, she could come in and make changes that we need in the world and in this country and be a very successful president. I don't remember feeling that way about Joe Biden when he was the vice president for Barack Obama. I don't remember anyone before that just like inspiring me as a presidential candidate. And I think that's exciting.
No, I think it's pretty clear that we're members of the Kamala fan club.
President and vice president of the vice presidential campaign for Vice President Kamala Harris.
No, we're not VP and president. We're like co-presidents. Come on now.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
I was gonna follow your lead and you be El Presidente, but next time.
Next time. No, we already talked about my political career.
Oh, true, Mayor.
And
then there's just one last piece that I want to talk about of like the important. It kind of goes back to a few things that we've talked about with Kamala Harris and your responsibility as a voter in general. There's an article by Nikki Solis, who is a defense attorney. So for those who don't know how this works, the attorney general represents the state. A defense attorney represents a suspect, or they're defending the defendant. The attorney general is trying to prosecute the case. When Kamala Harris was the attorney general of California, she was opposed. She was on the opposite side most times of Nikki Solis, who was a defense attorney in California. Nikki Solis took it upon herself to have an opinion piece written in USA Today saying that Kamala Harris was the most progressive, and like, take out the word progressive because to me that's like a hot button. It gets people triggered. I look at it when she was writing this article as synonymous with the most fair, the most willing to look at the actual situation as opposed to sticking to her guns just to stick to her guns. And you kind of see that in a lot of the things that came up in front of her. So we talked about not prosecuting youth that got wrapped up in prostitution. We talk about, criminal justice reform. She had a major decrease in the number of marijuana cases. If like marijuana is a legal business now, and it was becoming a legal business in California while she was a prosecutor. And there was a huge drop off in possession cases. So those were not charged as felonious anymore. They were charged as misdemeanors, which, okay, if you're going to have someone on one side be able to make money off this legally and someone else is going to become a felon for it, that makes no sense to me. And like the laws were still in place for large grow cases, but she stopped prosecuting them as felonies for, like small amounts of marijuana because it was legal in the state to sell it if you had a license, a business, and all that. She also stopped taking possession to court because it was in the process of becoming a legal thing to smoke. You can smoke marijuana. You can walk down the streets of California and smoke marijuana. So how can you say that someone needs to go to jail for it? And she was a huge part in that progress, in the progression of stopping the war on drugs. And I air quote again, but like, she was a huge factor in driving force in that. So you feel about that how you want, but I want a president and a vice president who stay with the times. They stay with what the country is developing and not staying stuck in what the country was, because I think that's what we need more than anything right now.
For sure. Yeah, I think just remember, again, critical thinking is going to come into play. And one should always come into play. Like, you should think for yourself. But I think that is going to be much more important in the next 78 days, or less, as we'll chat about here in a second.
We will chat about that. It's going to be way less than 78.
Yeah, I think it's going to be very, very important.
And that, hey, you've done podcasting before, because that was a stellar.
Wow. That transition.
That was a smooth transition.
Let's make that smooth transition not smooth by talking about how smooth it
So you want to go ahead and finish out your transition?
Oh, yeah. So Jordan and I talked about it at the top, but we're also living in a pandemic, regardless of what some people on your Instagram not wearing masks look like. We're still in a pandemic, and we're going to be in one for a while. We're still waiting for vaccine development. So life in 2020 is going to stay pretty much the same, which causes a wrinkle come November 3rd. There's going to be a lot of people who don't feel comfortable or unable to, for a variety of reasons, go vote, as one would normally do on election day. And it's caused a lot of people to want to try to vote by mail. Which is, I mean, like, I voted by mail most every year. Normally it's a super simple process. You ask for an absentee ballot. So voted by mail and absentee ballot are similar. You have to get approval for why you're absentee a lot of times. And you'll receive something in the mail. I think Jordan has actually been my witness when I voted before. You go through, fill out your ballot, post it back in the mail, and you're done. And most of the time, like, I always voted in like October, well before, just to cross off the to-do list. But with there being an increased number of people who want to vote by mail, there's an increased pressure on the United States Postal Service, USPS. And if you've been following the news at all, you've heard the concerns for months, actually years. The USPS has always been like slowly dying, I feel like.
Yeah.
Is that people just don't use it. They use other things. They use Amazon, they use FedEx, they use UPS. There are other means to ship and receive packages and mail, and a lot of Americans are going through those other than the US Postal Service. And as of late, there have been a lot of concerns about the timeliness of receiving votes by mail, the ability to get ballots out to individuals by mail. And all of this now, of course, has turned into a political shit show. And it's just been the most 2020 thing to have, not the most, but it just like is parlaying into the theme of 2020, where, like, of course there's a pandemic, and of course, like, if we want to vote by mail, why wouldn't we make it simple? It's got to be difficult, right?
Of course. I mean, and it's literally voter suppression. This is 2020's version of voter suppression. So instead of,
removing
Exactly. Instead of removing or making the lines crazy long at a polling place, we're just not going to give people the option to vote from the safety of their home, and safety because of a coronavirus pandemic that is still very much alive and well. And like, it's here. It's not going to be gone in the next 78, 77 days, depending on when you listen to this. But like, it's here. And the way that people are going to vote is by mail-in ballot. And this isn't just like some people. There's a lot of people who are going to be voting this way. President Trump and his wife Melania just requested their mail-in ballots, although he thinks that a mail-in ballot is more at risk to become fraudulent or more at risk.
The opposition to vote by mail is that if we have vote by mail, there will be voter fraud.
Yes.
And I feel like voter fraud has been a central argument and concern. I mean, the first presidential election that I could vote in and you could vote in was 2012. And I feel like even that, and I'm sure earlier too, but again, like we're speaking from our experiences, that was a concern then, and it's a concern now. And that in and of itself is a highly politicized conversation. I feel like I had this conversation at the dinner table with my parents on like the presentation of a ID to get to cast your vote, currently what you need, and like how is that a problem? How is it not a problem?
Right.
So this, I feel like, is not a new issue. The vote by mail has just created a new wrinkle in this
yes.
issue.
Mm-hmm. It's definitely not a new issue. It's just, it changes its shape.
Yes.
Like a lot of things that are not fair in this country. They don't go away. They don't come out of nowhere. They've been here for a very long time. And the way they present changes. And I think like we can't really talk about this without talking about a particular postmaster general, which honestly sounds like the dopest title until you realize it's just like you're in charge of the post office, dude. And this is
listen, do not knock the U.S. Postal Service.
Oh, but we do knock Louis DeJoy, who is the appointed postmaster general chosen by Donald Trump after donating $1.2 million to Donald Trump's campaign and $1.3 million to the Republican Party, which no issue there. You have all this money, you can donate, but I think it speaks to where his allegiances lie and why we are part of the reason why we are seeing the United States Postal Service not being prepared for the United States Postal Service to take part in the presidential election this year.
Right. And I think part of it, like, who is DeJoy? So he was appointed by Trump because we talked about it before. The U.S. Postal Service has been bleeding money. There have been problems with the Postal Service before in terms of its finances. And I haven't gone into the nitty gritty of what that looks like, but DeJoy was charged with the task of like turn this ship around, basically, from my understanding. And like, correct me if I'm wrong.
No, that's accurate.
5,000 foot view from above is turn this shit around. So what has he done to turn this ship around? Well, it's been also, again, under the microscopic lens of COVID, there are lots more people that are ordering things online to be shipped rather than going to the store. So there's been a tremendous strain on like supply chains, like full stop, just across the country. That includes mail. So he cut out like overtime hours and employees in all attempts for cost savings. With those changes to be made, there's been a concern now because we've seen a delay in packages and mail being received. So if I were to mail Jordan something, which should maybe take 3 days, is now taking significantly longer. I literally mailed a package to a friend in Texas, and I kept like updating and looking at the shipping number. I was like, why? Like, what's going on? It's in Texas. Why is it not on her doorstep? And it took several days longer. So it was like a birthday thing that was already a late gift. I'm so sorry. You know who? I don't know if she knows who she is. So it's even later. So we're all seeing that, and the concern is, hey, DeJoy made these changes, gave him the task that he was charged. Okay, but if we're getting things late now, what's going to happen if I vote by mail and I post it, but it doesn't come until November 4th? Election day is November 3rd. Well, what happens then? That vote's not counted, right? But it should be counted because I posted it.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of states also have, if you're voting by mail or absentee ballot, that you can request that ballot 7 days before the election. There's now questions as to whether or not the post office can get those ballots out to, if I raise my hand and say a week before the elections that I want to vote by mail, I raise my hand 7 days before, that there's a question of me even getting the ballot in time to then turn around and post it back. And so this is what we're talking about when we say voter suppression is, are these votes going to be counted? Like, how are we going to get people to vote and be able to go out to the polls?
I mean, you want to talk about voter suppression? The president, who is obviously running for re-election, literally said if they don't get extra funding for states and the USPS, that means you can't have universal mail-in voting because they're not equipped to have it. So he is admitting that there's an issue, there's a problem, and he's opposed to providing this additional funding. This isn't stuff that is opinion-based of Kaitlin and I. This is literally what is coming out of this man's mouth. Openly. He's not being covert about it. He's not trying to hide anything. He's being right there in your face with his hope and goals to not have this money be going and funded towards the USPS because he knows that it will have a positive impact on him having a higher chance of winning this election.
Right.
Definition of voter suppression. Literally
the USPS and outlet letters. Wow, that Southern draw came out. Letters. You hear about them letters? What was that? I've only had like half a beer. I just moved to a more Southern place now. It's just coming out of me. So that was a lot. Sent 46 letters out to states and DC, the District of Columbia, saying, hey, we've got problems. There's a significant, I'm getting this from a Reuters article that's called U.S. Postal Service Watchdog to Probe Service Woes as Worries Rise About Mail Ballots by Andy Sullivan and David Shepardson. So if you want to keep
I read the letter from North Carolina. I just happened to pick North Carolina because that's where you're from. Ooh. And it says in the letter that we have concerns.
Yes.
Not only do we have concerns about getting them back from you, we have concerns about just getting the ballot to you in time.
Yes.
Which is absurd. And if the service knows this and they're making it known, you would think that everyone would want this to be a fair election and the people in charge would do what they have to do to make it so.
Yes.
The whole fabric of this country is like the democratic process, and it's literally in jeopardy.
So, and like the other thing is, like we said, there's a concern about voter fraud. So in this same article, evidence has shown that mail voting is as secure as any other method. And like Jordan said, this is a great, however, public records show, this is Trump, that he requested mail ballots for himself and his wife, Melania, before Florida's Tuesday primary election. So it's just like, what?
Where's the cognitive, like, that man doesn't experience cognitive dissonance. He can't. His head would have exploded by now. There's one last piece to this voter suppression where people, like the Postal Service was actually going out and removing mailboxes from neighborhoods. This happened in 4 states, one of which is New York, which is a massive, massive piece of the Electoral College. Like, winning New York is massive for a presidential candidate to have the opportunity to win the election, as we found out in 2016. So for there to be mailboxes being removed, not only is that the other roadblocks, like getting the ballots mailed out to you, getting those ballots returned in time for them to count, but now actually getting that into the mailbox is getting even more difficult. So,
question.
Go for it.
Okay, so is this like, hey, I have a mailbox in front of my house and
No,
they're,
no, no. This
or
is
is it
like,
like the blue ones that you
you know,
see?
like the big, cool, like blue ones that you never really go to because everything else is online.
Not true. I literally used them all the time when I lived in Philly.
Okay, you're a fake millennial. Probably pay bills with checks and envelopes. But
No, I just
for the
write
rest of us in 2020,
cards to people.
yes, it's these big, it's not the mailbox that's attached to your house or out front in your
Okay,
lawn.
I feel I like no, but I feel like we need to like clarify
Yeah,
like
yeah,
what.
no, that's fair. There's not like some bandits in the
I
middle
was
of,
just like, I'm so
uh,
sorry. You can no longer receive your mail to your home address.
yes, yeah. I was going from the city perspective where we have to drop it into a mailbox. But yeah, they were being picked up and taken away in 4 states. So the voter suppression is out there. Read, do your research, know what's going on, and we're going to help you out with making sure your vote counts because this is, again, a huge election, but it's also a more complicated process to vote than most of us have been used to. So we talked about you want to make sure that you get out early and request that voter mail-in ballot so that you have time for it to be sent to you and time for it to be sent back. The post office has said they want you to do it 18 days, have it in the mail 18 days before November 3rd. So the middle of October is pretty much the absolute latest. If you're voting, if you're trying to get this out the same time you're trying to plan your Halloween costume, you're putting yourself at risk to be too late. October 15th, everyone who's listening, have that in the mail, sent back, signed, sealed, delivered, so that your vote can definitely count. You also have the option. Go ahead.
No, that also means if you're posting it back on the 15th, you need to be requesting it by late September, early
Oh, for
October.
sure.
Asterisk, you need to look based on your state about the opportunity to absentee vote. I think now in the state of Tennessee, you have to have an excuse. So I did absentee voting, like when I was in college. I lived in North Carolina, but I stayed registered in my hometown, and I just easy enough requested it whenever, and there was no pushback or issue. But I do believe Tennessee, and I think there's a handful of other states where you have to have an excuse,
Mm-hmm.
as in I'm sick, which I don't even know if that's like an excuse anymore. But like you have some valid excuse of like I'm
I'm in
traveling.
school or I work out of state. I'm here temporarily, but my main residence is still here.
Right. There are additional steps that you need to take. So what you need to do now is, as we sit here in August, take the steps now, do your due diligence to understand what your vote will look like. And we understand that you may not know how exactly you want to vote yet for November. And as we spoke earlier, it's not just a presidential election. There will be other local things that
Mm-hmm.
are on the ballot, I'm sure, for November 3rd. So take some time now, do your due diligence, see what you need to do to be able to vote by mail, and evaluate if that's something you want to do.
And how to do that, you can go to usa.gov/absentee-voting. Honestly, if you just Google
Yes, Google
mail-in ballot,
USA absentee
because you
voting.
have to check, we can't give you all the answers because you have to check for your particular state.
Right. Um, but look it up, make that decision now, have your voting plan, make sure that you and your friends, your family members all know what they're doing. Put a reminder in your phone for late September, early October to request your ballot should you choose to do vote by mail as soon as you get it. And as soon as you're comfortable, but no later than October 15th, figure that out, cast your vote, and post it back.
Even if you don't know who you're voting for on the entire ballot or any part of the ballot, you can at least do the research to see how you want to do your voting. You can at least do that now, and then you can continue to do more research to find out who you want to give your vote for, but at least make sure that you have the opportunity to get your vote in on time so that it counts.
Right.
Because this wasn't always a right for everyone. A lot of people had to fight very hard for this. It's 2020, and we have Kamala Harris, again, a woman on the ballot for the first time of a major party.
Hillary.
Correct. First
Kamala.
black woman, Asian woman to be on the major party ticket. She will be the first to win on that party ticket, hopefully. Hopefully.
Again,
Speaking into existence.
You vote how you want, everyone. But
Yes. But again, it is 2020 now, and we have Kamala and Joe Biden and Trump and Pence, who are in this election for president and vice president.
Again? I feel like Nader always runs as like some.
I think he's not now. I think he's chilling.
Oh,
He's just chilling doing something else.
Remember, please don't vote for Kanye.
But again, it's 2020, the crazy year that is 2020. If you were to rewind 100 years.
Oh, no, you have to introduce this in the right way.
I'm going to let you do it. Go ahead.
Okay, I'll intro Jordan. So, we've talked about voter suppression. We've talked about Kamala. We've talked about how important this election is. We've talked about what you need to do to be able to vote. Now we're going to talk about something you didn't learn in class.
And that is, what is suffrage? Not suffering, suffrage. Voter suffrage. Like I alluded to, 2020, we're in it. 100 years ago in 1920, it was the first time that women had the right to vote in the United States. The United States wasn't the first country. They weren't the last country, but they were not like at the forefront of this. I believe it was, I want to say Finland. I did just look this up. I want to say it was Finland or another Nordic country that was the first country in 1890. And then the next country was 1906. The U.S. was in 1920, was the first time that women could vote in America. And it was 1965 when Black people finally had the right to vote in the United States. So 100 years ago, and what is that, 65 years ago, 55 years ago?
Well, I don't like that, but I think it's 55.
Yeah. Not that long ago. It's not that long ago. And that's why I'm so passionate about it, going out and making sure that everyone, regardless of your beliefs or your political stances, go out and vote, because you didn't always have this option. Well, not all of us always had this option. And it is such an important and deeply connected to what this country's supposed to be. In order for it to be living up to its values, we all have to be active participants in
right.
it.
We live in a live democracy, and that's so great and so rare. You see, I mean, I feel like we see all around the world people who want to try to vote, who want to have a democratic system, and they go through all these horrendous, violent things to try to get to the polls.
Yeah.
And to try to vote.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And if you want to talk about being a patriot, like, this is it. This is what.
Or you see things like, Russia, where like, yeah, we're voting, but oh my God, it's crazy. Putin won again. Like, we have some really wonderful rights as being American citizens, and those are so important, and we need to protect those, and we need to participate in democracy, and we need
Absolutely. And then talked about a lot of things today, and we have to leave the people with the call to action, because we don't just talk the talk. We make sure we have these conversations and we go and put action behind them. So, Kay, what's our call to action for this episode?
So we're going to encourage you, like we said, you need to think critically, figure out what's important to you. I discovered this website when I was in my undergrad, and I have recommended it to virtually everyone. It's called iSidewith, iSidewith.org. What it is it allows you to look and figure out where you sit on key issues. It's a pretty extensive questionnaire. The questions are like, I agree or disagree, and they're based on certain policies. What it'll do is formulate all those answers that you give and say, based on the way you answer, you align more with, and at the time, you could do it for Democrats when we had 20 people vying for 5. But you could do it now for the 2020 presidential election. And it will go question by question. And you can look and see, it'll give you a percentage that says, you align with Joe Biden 87% of topics.
And what's great, like one of my favorite things, you introduced it to me, and I love it that it is not partisan.
Yes. So, it'll say like exactly that. And then, it'll tell you, okay, great. Well, you agree with Joe Biden 87% and you agree with Trump 51%. And you can look and see like the things that you like and, the things that you agree with. And then from there, you can say, okay, well, what's most important to me? Here are the things that I align with these people on, and it's given a weighted percentage, like, those are arbitrary numbers, but 87% to Joe Biden, 51% to Trump, but like, you can then go and say, well, the things that I agree with Joe Biden on aren't as important as some of these other things that I hold true, so you can make decisions that way. And then on our side, you can also go through and look based on specific candidates. So you could just say, okay, well, I want to look at Donald Trump and I want to see where he stands on these topics. They also have like a chart where it'll show, given our political culture, where someone sits on like a map, like how progressive, conservative, liberal, et cetera, Tea Party, what is it? We have there's progressives for Democrats, but what is like
conservative?
But what is the far right of a conservative?
I've never been there.
Oh, I don't know. Whatever. Okay. I don't know what that word is, but you can look and see where they sit on that. It's a really great resource. Again, it's nonpartisan, so you're not getting things shoved down your throat.
It doesn't lean one way or the other. We talked about slants a lot in this episode and the importance of like finding resources that don't go one way or the other. This is just you answering questions and a algorithm kicking out what aligns with the way that you answer your questions. It cannot be more straightforward.
Right. And the nice thing too is, I said it's an A or B, like a yes or no. I agree with this or I don't. The great thing is, as more people continue to use it, you can hit other options and you can type in your own answer. So, or if you're like, should we build a wall? Could be a question. I think it was at one point. I'm not sure if it is anymore. But should we build a wall, which is in reference to immigration reform?
Right.
You could say no. Or then you can hit other and you could say, I don't think that we need to build a wall, but
you need stronger immigration laws.
Immigration reform. That could be a potential other answer. Or like, yes, we should build a wall, but make Mexico pay for it. That's an option. Right. Like people have generated those things in.
It's not super binary. It's not yes, no. It's not A, B.
It can be, but then
be built out. There's some that are more built out, and you have the option of filling.
And if there's something that you don't know a lot about, like let's say you don't know a lot about immigration, there is prompts that will go through and talk about like what our current situation is. They're not super in depth, but they'll give resources to go and read more about it or whatever. So like we said, it's a great jumping off point because
and what's it called again, Kay?
isidewith.org.
Perfect.
We want you to be involved. We want you to be educated. We want you to care. Hopefully that's been impressed upon enough. And this is a great stepping stone to getting to understand what's important. Jordan and I could talk all day about what we think is important to us, but we're not you. We're not voting. We're not voting for you. You need to think about what's important to you, and what you want your community and your country to look like.
And again, the title of this episode is, Are You Ready for November 3rd? That's not a question that we can answer for you. It's a conversation we wanted to have together. And after you listen to this episode, you do your research on the candidates, you find out what's important to you and who aligns with those important factors, and you make sure that you have your plan to vote. Then you can finally answer that question of, are you ready for November 3rd?
Yeah. Also, so sorry, it's not .org, it's .com. I side with .com.
Thank you.
.org, .gov, whatever, Jesus. It's .com. I side with .com.
Any other corrections, comments, concerns that you have for the people?
Oh my God. I don't know. I don't think so. My brain is mush.
Well, I want to say congrats to you on getting started with your MBA program.
Oh, thank you.
Excited to see
business, all business now. I look like a slide with my phone. Fine.
And as always, fight racism wherever you see it. Be confident, do your research, and join us in this mission to talk the talk.
Bye.
Peace.